Hello, Helsinki! It's good to be here. I'm Mike Rothenberg, the founder and CEO of Rothenberg Ventures and River Studios, which is a virtual reality studio. And I am excited to be here to talk to you today about investing in virtual reality and accelerating virtual reality startups. Recently, Rothenberg Ventures became the most active virtual reality investor in the world, as we've invested in 30 virtual reality companies now, passing great investors like Google Ventures and Andreessen Horowitz. Later on, I'll explain why we got so excited about virtual reality and where we see the applications. But a quick sneak preview, we do think that gaming and entertainment are first in VR and incredibly valuable, but that's just the beginning of the VR applications. As an investor, we get to see a lot of things and share those perspectives, but as a person, I get to be really excited about the technical applications that have the most potential to change the quality of our lives and our world. So that's why I flew around this world to share with you here in about 15 minutes what we've learned by looking at hundreds of VR startups over the past 3 years and try to help explain why VR is awesome for you, what you can do about it, and why VR is awesome for us. So I think this question may or may not have been asked earlier, I'm not sure, but could I see, for calibration purposes with a show of hands, who has tried virtual reality? Okay, that's really awesome. That's more than half the room. And if I had asked that question last year, there would have been almost no hands go up. And if I'm on this stage asking that question again next year, we'll see every hand go up. That's where we are in early adopters of virtual reality, which is what I believe this room is with technology enthusiasts who would come to a conference and sit at the black stage and listen to the deep technology. So the first question is, why now? Because virtual reality has been on the frontier of technology for decades. And there's even been a number of movies made about it with some incredible foresight. And that begs the question, what's different this time? There have been a lot of investors been burned by VR. There have been a lot of companies already built, some successful, most of them not. So what is different this time? Well, to give a little bit of context first about our view of technology, I want to take a quick aside about an investor perspective of what is interesting overall, and then bring it back to virtual reality. So there's a concept of, I'd like to introduce a concept of blue oceans of profit, big profit pools. And when you're a big investor or a big company, you have to actually be in big known profit pools. If you have a lot of capitalization behind you, you have to be able to make a lot of profit. And you can only do that in large profit pools. And so what happens is, all the big companies and all the big venture capitalists have to spend their time in pretty well-known industries and pretty well-known things. And so in technology, today that might be something like mobile applications or e-commerce, which has been around for 15, 20 years, but is actually really profitable but competitive. And so especially if you're a small venture capital firm, as we are compared to them, we have to go compete in areas where we have a differential advantage. And so the good news about every blue ocean is that it starts out as a blue pond, and it grows into a blue lake, and then it becomes a blue ocean. And so there are these, if you swim to the frontier, there are these pools of interesting things that are happening that may or may not someday be valuable. An example of that would be the internet in 1995, when people are asking, why would I ever use email? Or mobile in 2005, why do I care if my phone is in my pocket? And virtual reality in 2015, why would I put this thing on my face and try to experience something different? And what's great about these things is that they start out on the frontier, but the signals are all there. For example, in VR, there's already billions, not hundreds of millions, being invested, especially by the big US technology companies, into virtual reality and augmented reality. there are more than 1,000 VR startups now, whereas a couple of years ago, it was in the low hundreds. And the number of people who have tried it is now in the millions, if not the tens of millions, whereas that threshold was just crossed in 2015. So there's a lot of things that are really interesting about VR. But the most important reason about why now is that VR actually works. So there was a problem with VR in the past about the latency of if it was too slow when you turn your head to have your screen re-rendered in front of you, you would get sick. And some people still get sick today, but that percentage has fallen dramatically. And the cost has fallen dramatically of making a VR experience possible. So the vast majority of what you need now to have VR is in your pocket if you have a smartphone, as probably everybody here does, because you have this incredible supercomputer and this absurd over-engineered screen that has way too many pixels for your eyeballs, but is perfect if you magnify it and put it close to your face. So we didn't realize that at first, though. So our first VR investment was almost 3 years ago. We invested in a company called Matterport, and it's a virtual reality company that is focused on real estate. It helps scan an interior space, helps you walk through it even remotely. And that was really inspiring for us, but it was among the other frontier technology things that we invest in, like robotics, artificial intelligence, and space and drones and things like that. And so then we sort of watched it and paid attention. It grew quite rapidly, but we didn't see VR as being that exciting. Then, about a year and a half ago, tried a demo from a guy named Eric Romo, who had a company called AltSpace VR, and he had this idea of social VR that it would be really nice to be able to interact with other people through VR. But he had a demo that actually worked. And so that was on the Oculus Rift, and that was incredible. It was a memorable experience I'll never forget. But the Oculus Rift was a dev kit. It still is. It'll come out in 2016 finally. But also it's expensive. And so that wasn't enough to say that VR is really here. And then about almost exactly a year ago, tried a demo called The Blue from Neville at Weaver, which is so amazing because you feel like you're underwater with sharks and whales and dolphins. You really feel like it. People scream when they see the sharks coming at them, and they want to. I've seen people do this when they swim with the whales, and it's really an incredible experience. But what was really amazing about that was that he did it from a cell phone. So just to bring that point completely home, Google partnered with the New York Times and distributed 1 million Google Cardboard headsets via the New York Times distribution channel just last week. So the number of people in the US who have tried VR tripled in a week, this week, from about 500,000 to 1.5 million. But it's the first week, I think, possibly in human history that 1 million people have tried VR, and that's an incredible thing. So as early stage investors, we saw that as an opportunity, and we wanted to know, what can we do about this? What can we do besides just investing in a couple of companies? And we realized that there were a lot of founders that we were talking to and entrepreneurs who didn't really believe that there was venture capital funding for VR, and that's empirical. There really wasn't. There were only a few VR investments. And so one of the things that we realized we could do was send a signal to the market that it was okay to be investing in VR, especially now that it works, and that companies like Google and HTC are actually building really high-end type of systems that will really give you the premium experiences, and then Google's helping people cross the chasm with the extremely cheap low-end version. And so to do that, we announced the River program, which is a frontier technology program, which has more VR companies in it than anything else. And we said that we were going to invest in at least 10 VR companies in 2015. We have now invested in 30 VR companies, including 5 of the top 10 best funded VR companies that are still active at this time, which would be we did invest in Matterport, AltSpace, and Weaver. And we also invested, the other 2 we've invested in that are in the top 5 funding are Jaunt and 8i. And what's really interesting about that is that these companies collectively, the 30 we've invested in, have raised $250 million of capital. So there is capital now, and this is a real thing, and it's at the very early stages, but the growth that's happening is amazing. And that is the most interesting thing about lakes and ponds. They grow faster than oceans. And so if you're in a lake or a pond and it's growing to an ocean, you will have the greatest career trajectory, your skill set will be the most valuable, your dollars you invest can grow at the fastest rate. It takes conviction to be in the frontier, because by definition, you are not where everyone else is. And as long as you are not where everyone else is, but you have conviction about that, you can be contrarian and right, then it means that you can have a great opportunity. And that goes for founding companies, it goes for joining companies, it goes for skill sets you want to pick up, and it goes for investing. And that's happened time and time again. So that was why now. I think there's a question too, which is why us? Let's go to the next one. So why VR? So I mentioned earlier that gaming and entertainment are going to lead the way. It makes sense. Systems like whether it's Sony or an Oculus or an HTC, these are really high-end gaming machines. And there may be other applications we use for them, but they're just unbelievable gaming machines that actually can help combine entertainment with gaming and help when the interactive sort of experiences start to happen, that line gets blurred. And that market is really huge. And the interest level of the gaming community in particular of experiencing their games and entertainment is very high. So those are the early adopters, though. So there's also a large number of companies that is growing every week of non-gaming and entertainment applications that we find really compelling. So I'd like to start with, I'm going to go through a few of these applications, because when I mentioned that I'm extremely excited about the power of this technology, it's not just that it's cool, and it's really cool. It's that it actually has the power to change lives. I think VR changes lives the most directly when it comes to healthcare applications. There's a company we've invested in called Sios, which helps with your fear. So it is possible with VR to practice things like standing on heights, or driving in cars, or flying in planes, or being in a room full of spiders when you're scared of these things, but to do it on a gradual basis in a controlled environment until you practice. And otherwise, you would not be able to do these things. You can also help with your pain management. There are hospitals in Washington State that have experimented with VR with one of our other companies called DeepStream, where they help give VR, something called Snow World, to child burn victims who have to change their bandages every day, which is excruciating, and they use morphine to deal with the pain. They've found that they can drastically reduce the amount of morphine just by putting them in a snow world, and it's really a redirection of focus. Pain is a perception, so they can refocus that and actually give those children and ultimately other other people going through pain, they can give them less drugs. And then there's a quality of life thing that can happen too. So another company we've invested in called Fove is a technology company that does eye tracking in virtual reality. And what's really amazing about that is that the eye is a way more natural interface than a lot of the things we have right now, with like moving your head or tapping buttons, which we still need in VR so far. But eye tracking is really incredible. And so on their homepage, they show a video of a university student with muscular dystrophy who is playing the piano in a live concert because he's using a Fove headset and eye tracking software to choose the keys that he's playing, and forever changing his life. I think education is incredibly compelling too. As a student, I found reading history textbooks, for example, to be really boring, but I probably would have paid more attention if I had actually gotten to go back to Rome and listen to Caesar give a speech, like a rousing speech, as opposed to reading it on a page. And I don't think it stops there. I think it's almost any moment would be more interesting than experiencing than watching. And it also goes to things like zoos. I don't think we'll have zoos in the future. I think people will just be able to be as close as they want to any animal virtually. And I think it goes to, one of our companies created a universe, and you can see the scale of the universe called SolarX. And I think that the learning abilities of this technology are limitless. Travel is really interesting. I believe that there is a great interest and need to travel more than we do, all of us. And especially if we could do it without having to pay much for it or get on planes or anything like that. And I don't think VR displaces real travel, but I think it may increase the world of travel by 10x. where perhaps 9 out of 10 of those experiences are now virtual. It will be really incredible, especially if you don't have the ability to travel, to see any place in the world through virtual reality. We mentioned before AltSpace VR, so social, experiencing things with people you love. I don't believe that VR is a substitution for real life, but it is a great substitution for things like FaceTime or things like calls or texts. And so when you're, for example, having a conversation with your mother or your grandmother from a different state, it would be nice to feel like you were there. And as I don't know if any of you, especially as a kid, ever wanted to do things like fly or time travel or teleport or walk through walls or be a rock star, but all of these things are possible today with virtual reality. And then finally, we need platforms to do all of these things, and companies like Weaver are creating those platforms, those creative platforms where creative individuals can actually come and build these applications. So finally, I'd like to talk about what you can do about it. So the first thing you can do about it is to start trying VR. So there are already hundreds of applications that are available if you have a smartphone for Android or iPhone. But starting as soon as next quarter, early adopters will get to try a whole plethora of applications and games entertainment that have been under development for sometimes years now that will come out with the Oculus and the Vive. And it will still have an incredibly long way to go when that comes out. We are in the very early days. We went from the preseason to the beginning of the game. That's where we are now. And so there will be a lot of disappointing virtual reality experiences. There will be a lot of mind-blowing ones too. But where we are now compared to the future is really more analogous to where the internet was in 1995 or 1996. It's just starting to work, but we haven't really figured out all of the amazing things we can do with it. And it's not that useful for most people who aren't early adopters or technology enthusiasts. That's why there's a moral imperative for people in this room to take note of it, to understand where the value is, and I think look for the opportunities where if you're looking to start a company, to start a company in a blue lake that's growing to a blue ocean is really a wonderful thing. I think that there are a lot of technologists now that are looking to get into VR, and there's really an incredible number of untapped applications where there are very few people even trying to build things. So that's the next step. Please start developing in VR. Start forming companies in VR. And when you form a company and you build your product or service and you're starting to get excited about it, apply to River, the Frontier Technology Program. We have invested in every continent except for, I guess, Antarctica. But we do invest globally. And we welcome you to come visit the River program in San Francisco. We're right there in Soma, and we have people come through all the time, and we have, at any given moment, we might have a dozen VR companies. Come try some amazing demos and experiment. So we do put our money where our mouth is. We don't just ask you to build things. We also like to try to take our own risk, so we're putting our money where our mouth is. And for the first time, I want to announce that in 2016, at least 1 out of every $3 we invest will go into virtual reality. And we will bring our total VR investments up to at least 50 total. So thank you for coming.